Welcome back to episode number 5. Today we are going to talk about nodes, the node pipeline, node order, and why do nodes matter, and how do we use them. This is a very important lesson, so you should stick around, because nodes is something that we use constantly in Resolve. So I'm here on the color page, okay? So now, before I get started, before we start doing exercises and things like that, first thing that I want to remind you is that everything that we talk about in these lessons is in the book available on the DaVinci Resolve website. So, okay, you can Google it on Blackmagic, or alternatively, you can just follow the link in the description of this video and find all the source files and the book as well. You could either buy the book, okay, on Amazon, or you could just download the ebook, which is free, and follow along with me. So I highly suggest you to get the book and follow along, because you have all the details and information that you need. Okay, so with that said, now let's get started and let's get right into it. So now the first thing we're going to do here is, by the way, with your arrows up and down, you can scroll through your timeline. So we're going to get to this clip number 5, and then we can close the timeline tab here so we have a little bit more space. Okay, so now first thing we're going to talk about is the nodes. Okay, so we're going to talk about the anatomy of the node. How does it work and how can we best utilize it? Okay, so now the first thing we can see here in our node, we can see that we have 2 triangles here and 2 squares. One triangle is green and one triangle is blue, and same with the squares. We have a green square and a blue square. So now the top, okay, see, this is an input and this is the output. So this is the RGB input and this is the RGB output. And underneath we have our key input and key output. Okay, so now I'm going to add a few nodes by pressing Option S. Okay, so we have 4 nodes here. And one common thing that you can see here immediately, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit better over here, is one thing that you could see right away is that the RGB input, okay, and RGB output, there is a continuous connections between each node on the RGB side. That is because what the RGB signal does, you are carrying over all the information from one node to the next. So say using your standard corrector tools inside of Resolve, okay, so you are making some changes, okay, creative changes, whether it's you're changing a hue, whether you're changing saturation, contrast, right? So everything that you're doing, okay, needs to be carried over to the next node. And that is done through the RGB signal that gets carried over to the next node, the next node, the next node, up to the end, okay, to where we have our rendered clip. So now this is very important, because now we always have to have connections from node to node. As you can see, this is an uninterrupted connection from node to node. Now, the same is not true for our key. Okay, so the key underneath here, where you can see once again the blue input and blue output here, okay, that is for things such as power windows, using qualifiers. So if you're really making any matte, you want to carry over that data to the next node. Okay, so that is the use that you would use the key for. So in this case, like if you were, say you wanted to qualify this man's face over here, okay, so you want to key out his face and then carry over that information to the next node, then you'd see a connection line between this first node and the second node, because you're carrying over that data. So now, as you can see now, not necessarily going to have that connection always going on from node to node, and that is because it depends on your needs. It's not like the RGB input and output where it always is uninterrupted. Okay, so with keying is only dependent if you're keying a subject, as I said, a background, or anything really, if you're making power windows or really any mask, okay? So that is something very important to understand. Now, another thing to talk about is that every node, okay, so the input here, the RGB input, you can only have one connection to your RGB input. However, you can output how many connections as you need. Okay, so you could have multiple ones. Say, once we explore later the parallel nodes and layer mixer nodes, you could see that you can output many different connections, but you can only have one connection to your input. That is something also very important to understand. Perfect. So now that we know a little bit more about the anatomy of the nodes and how this works, let's get on with our first exercise. So the first thing I'm going to do here, this is a shortcut. You're going to press Command Home, and that resets, okay? It resets your node tree over here. And the first thing we're going to do here, we're going to rename this to black and white, our first node over here. Perfect. So now, first thing we're going to do is to turn our clip here black and white. So we are going to go here on our RGB mixer, okay, right over here. And you can see here we have this preserve luminance, and we also have this monochrome. So if I check the monochrome now, what has happened now, we are actively have changed our clip to black and white. This is very commonly used when working with black and white footage. Okay, so Colorist use this because it has the versatility, okay, that you can sort of work with it much better than just changing your saturation, because now you have also the options to change the red output, green output, and blue output. So all the individual channels, okay, so you could make those changes as you might need. So now if say we want to brighten up the man's skin tone here, I can just come here on my red output, okay, and here I can increase it, and you can see that now we're brightening the man's face, but also a bit of the background, because we are targeting the red channel specifically in this instance. Okay, so in this case, I am going to raise it like that, just like that. So we have brought up a little bit more contrast, okay, with our background. Perfect. So now that we've done that, we can add a new node by pressing Option S. Alternatively, so let me undo that. You can always right click on your current node and then say add node here, and then you can add a serial node, as you can see over here. Perfect. So now we are going to rename this to sepia. I don't know what I just typed there. So it's going to be sepia, just like that. Perfect. So now what we're going to do, we are going to switch over to our color wheels palette over here. And on the offset, we are going to drag that towards a more orange yellow tone. So we are going to take that to, okay, that's a little too far, to something like that. Okay, so now we've actively turned our clip here to a sepia color. So now it's important to understand how does saturation affect our image, our clip, but also how does the node order really matter. So let's see how that works. So if I go here on black and white, okay, do you think that is going to change? Is that going to make any effect if we go back to our RGB mixer? Is that going to change our image at all? Since we did add this sepia, okay, offset, we went to our color wheels and made it sort of orange yellow. Is that going to be affected now if we make any change to the black and white? Well, let's see. So if I go here on my blue output and we sort of drag that, you can see that the previous node is still affecting the sepia node that we added after it. That is happening because earlier we increased our red output. So we made this specific color more susceptible to changes. So now by changing our blue output here, okay, this individual channel over here, you can see that it's still affecting the image and the hues present within that image. So now I can sort of pick and choose where I want to take it. Okay, so now I can create a little bit more contrast. This is a very useful tool, the RGB mixer, specifically if you're working with black and white images, because you can target, as I said earlier, individual channels and make very pinpointed decisions and selections, okay? So that is very, very important. Okay, so now we can see that obviously our black and white node was our first node, okay? And we obviously turned our clip black and white, and then we added our sepia, which now this creative grade over here has taken over, okay, our image. Now it's definitely sepia. That was the point. Now, what happens if we do, though, invert the order of the two nodes? So we take our sepia and we put it before our black and white. Now, you can do this in two ways, by the way. You could either press E, okay, and now you disconnect your node and then place it right before. You can see this yellow line, okay? It's just like that, and then you drop it, and now you can see that we just inserted there. Alternatively, I'm going to undo what I just did, and I can obviously click on my sepia tone here and then hold command and then drag it right above our black and white. And this is a faster way to switch the order of your nodes. Okay, so very, very interesting. So now that we've done that, we can see right away that still the black and white node has completely overtaken our sepia and our image is rendered in black and white again. Okay, so that is something to understand with node order. We can see that the black and white definitely is overpowering our sepia. So what would happen now, though, if we went back to our sepia and we did go back to our color wheels, because that's what we used earlier with our offset to make it sepia? What would happen if we played with our offset and switched it, say, to a blue? Would that make any difference now to our last node, which is a black and white, which we have effectively turned our image again black and white. So what would happen if we made any change? So let's see. So I am going to drag my offset, okay? And you can see as I'm dragging that it's still effectively changing our image, okay? As you can see over here. And it's affecting it. Once again, that is because earlier what we did, okay, so in our black and white, and if we go back to our RGB mixer, we did increase our red output here, making the image once again more susceptible to changes in hues, such as the blue channel. So that is something very important over here to understand. So that is a bit about how sort of nodes interact with each other and how saturation can affect our image. So now I'm going to press again Command Home, and we're going to go to our second exercise when we're going to show how now contrast and luminance can affect our image as well and our nodes, okay? And how does the node order matter? Okay, first thing we're going to do here, we are going to name the first node here to lift, crush, just like that. And what we're going to do on this node, we are going to drag our lift now down. We're going to crash our blacks. And you can see now that definitely that is what happens. You can see here on the scopes, I'm looking here, we're definitely losing detail, as you can see over here. And this image does not look good at all. Now, what we need to understand is that, or at least what we should ask ourselves is, can we work non-destructively on Resolve? Let's see if that's possible. So we're going to add a new node again, once again, Command S, and then we are going to rename this to curves over here, curves restore. Perfect. So curves restore. And what we're going to do on this second node now, we are going to see if we can bring back our detail, because we definitely have lost it here. So I'm going to go here on my curves, and I am going to drag it up, as you can see over here. And you can see that what's happening here, it's actually, we're making the image even worse. Okay, so this is overexposed. We still have lost detail. Things are just clipping and nothing is really working. Okay, so I'm going to right click on this point I just created, and we need to understand something. Okay, so before we fix this image, we are going to go back on our lift crush over here, and we can see here on our curves, we can see our histogram, okay, which is showing us the distribution of our image here. And you can see that obviously this is the darkest and this is the widest point, and we are sitting sort of in the darker area and then a bit on the midtones, and this is like the distribution we can see on the first node. Then I can click on my second node here, and we can see that here we don't see anything. That is because we have affected our node by crashing the blacks. Okay, and everything sits here. It's very important to look at the curves because you sort of can see what you need to affect. Okay, so what do you need to pinpoint? This is good to understand how the Instagram works. It's perfect for you to make the right decision. Okay, so now something very important is that, however, here I can see that the histogram is showing me a much even distribution than here. Okay, but this clip is already dark. Why is it showing that? Well, that is because if you go here on your options, okay, on the histogram, this is showing us our input. So what this means, this is basically is telling you that this is showing you how does the node look when it enters the node tree. Okay, so before we made our adjustments, if you want to see how our node would look as we're making adjustment, you would want to change this to output, and now it's showing you live all the adjustment you make as you go through. So you could see that as we make changes, okay, the histogram is also changing as well. So now let me sort of show you this a little bit better. I'm going to Command Home that, and look, this is our histogram here on our first node. And as I'm making changes, you can see that we're now live, okay, previewing what is happening as we are making those changes. Okay, so now that is happening because once again we changed here on our option histogram to output rather than input. Okay, so I'm going to change it back to input over here, and we are going once again to right click here and say reset node grade. Okay, back to the beginning. So we're going to make that same adjustment we made earlier, and we are taking our lift down to that -20. Okay, so we once again crushed our blacks and we lost detail. And once again, we are going to rename this to lift crush, okay, and then we added another node, and we call this our curves restore. Perfect. So that's what we did. So now we weren't able to restore earlier the curves, but are we actually able to work non-destructively? Well, let's see. Once again, now I am going to, on my second node here selected, I am going to now increase the black point over here on my curves, and I am going to drag it up. And you can see that now we're actively bringing back the image the way it was in the beginning. Now, why did that happen? Well, that happened because earlier we targeted the wrong tonal range. We were targeting the midtones rather than our black point, which is representing our shadows, which is the lifts that we did change in our first node here to -20. So it is very important for you to understand what you're clicking in the curves and which tonal range you need to pinpoint, okay, and to adjust. So yes, we're able here in this case to bring back our image to the way it was initially. Okay, so that is very, very important. So now let's move on to the next exercise, and I am going to press Command Home once again and reset it to the beginning. And what we're going to do now is to see a little bit how node order also affects our pipeline, our node pipeline. So the first thing we're going to do here, I'm going to go here in my gallery, and on base grades, we are going to add this balance over here. So we're going to right click and say apply grade. So that applies it to our first node. So we can close that. So we balance our image. Then we can add a new node over here. And we are going to rename this node over here to a, actually, no, right like that, to a blue look. Perfect. So now we have our blue look here. What we're going to do is add a blue look. So here on my primary color wheels, we are going to drag our gain towards the bluer tone, so we're making it a little bit colder, and we're going to do our same with our gamma. You can see that now we have a very cold image, and with the lift we're going to counteract that and go more towards a red, okay, something like that. Perfect. So now the next thing I'm going to do here is I am going to also increase a bit the contrast, so add a little bit more contrast here, and also pivot, okay, so we make the image a little bit more contrasty. And then we are also going to here to lower our saturation here to about 40, to something like that. Okay, so now we should have something like this. So now we can see that this could work maybe for a sequence where you go back in time, a flashback, a memory, but it could be also a little bit jarring on the viewer, especially on the skin tones. So maybe we want to adjust the skin tones and maintain a little bit more of a natural look. So how can we do that? Well, we're going to add next a new node here, and we're going to call it skin tones. Perfect. So this is our new node. And how are we going to do that? We're going to target it with the qualifier. Okay. So we are going to here to our qualifier, and we are going to drag around our man's face over here to make a selection. Then remember to activate here your highlight mode. And you can see that now we are affecting a man's face. However, what is happening here is that nodes before matter a lot, because if the node preceding you, it's going to affect your selection. So you can see here in the skin tones is sort of affecting the entire background. So we're selecting a lot of parts in our image, and that is because they're very similar in hue. What do you want to do? Okay, so I am going to now reset this node grade, and the optimal here point to make a selection would be to do that before the blue look. So once again, we are going to hold command and drag the skin tones node over the blue look. So that allows us to invert them and have our skin tones before our blue look. So we're going to go back on our skin tones here. And once again, with the highlights active, we are on our qualifier. We're going to make a selection around the man's face. And now we can see that we have a much better selection than before, where less of the background is being detected. Okay, so it's being selected, I should say, compared to earlier. That, once again, it's because the blue look was actively influencing our selection. Now we have more of an ideal point to start rather than going and having a blue look and then making a selection with a qualifier. Okay, so now obviously you can also make a few adjustments here. Okay, we can adjust our width, we can adjust a little bit. Okay, so this obviously it's a matter of making a better selection, as you can see, something like that. Then we can move this, okay? So we can make all of that. But for now, let's leave it like that. So say we selected our man's face over here. And what we want to do now is to I'm going to quickly close that. And I am going to increase the saturation here to about 60. Okay, so we got a little bit more saturation. And as I said, now we selected the other parts of our image. So what we can do is add here a window, okay, that we can put around our subject, something like that. Okay, something like that. You can even come here, rotate it a bit, and add a little bit of like that. Perfect. And then here on the tracker, we can also track that. We can track forward and reverse to something like that. And now we've actively only selected our man's face over here. Okay. And then we add some saturation here. And what we could do next, I can close this, the highlight mode. And here, by the way, if the window is bothering you, you can just click here and say off once you're done. And then we can also take our offset and take it a bit towards more of a orange tone. Maybe that's a little too much. Double click and go back like that. And now we can see that if I go full screen with Command F, this is the before, this is the after. Okay, before, after. You can see that we actively brought back our skin tone, making our man look a bit more natural than before. Now, something to be aware of here is that no matter how hard you try to add more contrast or saturation or really make adjustments to your subject skin tones, the last node is still the blue look. So that is actively going to affect the overall look of your clip. So that's something to be aware of. So then the next question should be, how can I sort of avoid that? Okay, I want to add a blue look, but I also don't want that to actively affect my skin tone so much. I want something that is a little bit cleaner. Well, we can do that in a different way. So let me show you how easy we could do that. So here on our blue look, okay, we are now going to work with parallel nodes. Okay, so we are going to add a parallel node by right-clicking over here and saying add node and then add parallel. Now that adds a parallel node, as you can see over here. And I am going to zoom in a bit so you can see a little better to something like that. Bring those up a bit. And what we're going to do now, we're going to take our skin tones data over here by pressing Command C and copying that information. And we are going to go on our new parallel node we just created and paste that information with Command V. So now we actively have our skin tones here on our parallel node. Now, the previous node, the skin tones, we don't need any longer because we copied and pasted our data to our new parallel node. So we can just delete that. Perfect. And now we can see that we have our blue look and skin tone. And skin tones. Okay, so now, as I discussed earlier, if you remember, when we talked about the anatomy of the node, the nodes here can only take one connection to their input, but they can output many connections, okay? And you can see that also showcased here on our balance. You can see that it's outputting to our blue look. It's also outputting to our skin tones, as you can see here. Perfect. So now, what is the difference between earlier when we worked in a linear way to this, the parallel node? Well, what the parallel node is doing here, rather than working linearly and having each node, previous node affecting the next node, what is happening here is that we're actively now merging or splitting our blue look and skin tones evenly. So that now we don't have any more the blue look affecting our overall image. Okay, so we have evenly now split out, okay, merged our skin tone and our blue look. So this is optimal if you're making if you're working with skin tones, okay, and you're making those sort of corrections. Perfect. Now that we've done that and we talked about the parallel node, let's do also something else. If I come here to my mixer node over here, you can see that on the parallel mixer, I can right click here and I can say morph into a layer mix node. Now, something to understand before I do that is that the parallel mixer and the layer mixer on the surface, they look identical, okay? Their structure looks, there is no difference there. But what is different is their processing, how they operate. And I'm going to show you this in detail. So now, if we change this, okay, right click here and say morph into layer mixer node, look what happens to the face now. It just looks very, very strange, as you could see over here. Okay, it doesn't look good at all. Okay, why is that happening? Well, that is happening because, pay attention now, what is happening here is that earlier on the parallel mixer node, what was happening is that we split evenly our blue look and our skin tones. In the layer mixer node, instead, what is happening is that we have our blue look as the main layer, and we are overlapping now our skin tones on top of that in full opacity. So now we have something that looks very, very, very bad in this case, very unnatural. How can we fix that? Well, we can go here to our key section, and on the key output, we can reduce the gain to say something more manageable to 0.3. And now by doing that, you can see that we brought back a natural look to our subject. Now, something to be aware of now that we did this, okay? So this actively lowered the opacity, by the way, in case you're wondering what this did. It lowered the opacity, the effect of our skin tones, okay? That is overlaid on top of our blue look. That's all it did. But the thing to note here is that whatever adjustment you make on your layer mixer node, it's not exactly the same as the parallel mixer. Remember, their mode of operation is different. The parallel mixer combines, say in this case being the blue look and skin tones, evenly, while the layer mixer node, okay, overlaps your under node here underneath the skin tone node on top of your main, okay, layer node, which is the blue look. So it's a different mode of operation. They work differently. Okay, so that is the difference between these two nodes. Perfect. Now that we understand that, let's go more in detail and show you a few examples of how parallel and layer nodes operate. So we're going to go back on our edit timeline here, and I am going to press end to get to the end of our timeline. And we are going to add a new effect to our timeline over here. Perfect. So I'm going to close the media pool here just for simplicity. And here on the effects, we are going to look for the generators tab here, and you can see we have this grayscale over here. Okay, so I am going to click that and drag it into the timeline and just drop it here. Perfect. So now I'm going to press here Shift Z, okay, and I can close this, the effects tab over here, and now we can see that we have our grayscale here. Now, in order for the grayscale to appear in our color page with the properties, we are going to right click and then say new compound clip. Okay, and now we are going to rename it to grayscale, okay, just like that, and then press create. Perfect. So now that we've created that, we can switch back to our color page over here, and we can see that now we are into our grayscale, okay, over here. Alternatively, you can always come here. You can see you have the timeline, and we can arrow up and down till you find your new added grayscale. Perfect. So I'm going to close the timeline over here so we have a little bit more space, and I am going to zoom out just like that. Perfect. Now we are going to add a few nodes. First, I'm going to press Option S to add a node here. And then now we are going to add layer mixer nodes. Okay, so the shortcut for that is Option L. Okay. Alternatively, once again, you can right click and then come here to add node and then say add parallel. So we're going to add 3. We have a total of 3 parallel nodes here. I am going to zoom in again so you could see a little bit better. Okay. And I am going to bring those up just like that. And now we have our nodes over here. Perfect. So we are going to rename them now individually. This is going to be our red. Okay. Then we're going to rename our second node here to green. Okay. Perfect. And then our third node here to blue. You can see we have RGB. Okay. Red, green, and blue. So now to further understand how the layer mixer node operates compared to the parallel mixer, we are going to showcase that and show you how both change and are different from each other. Okay, so perfect. So now we are going to start with the blue over here. And first thing we're going to do here, we are going to add a window over here. And now we can't see it. That's because you have to select the power window. And now you have it visible here. Then we are switching back to our RGB mixer over here. And now this being the blue, on the blue output, I am going to increase that all the way. And now we can sort of, you have these options here, pan and tilt, and you can move around. Alternatively, you can just grab it here, but we are going to drop it down just like that. Okay, do something like that. Perfect. And you can see that now we have our blue. We are going to do exactly the same process with the green node and the red node. So once again, we are going to click that. Okay, this is our green. On the green output, we are going to increase that. Perfect. And now we can, once again, use the pan over here, as you can see, and we can use the tilt, okay, to bring it down to something like that. Maybe this can go something like that. It's good. Okay, perfect. And then, once again, we're going to do that with the red as well. And we're going to add another window circular window, and then on the red output, just increase that all the way to the top. And then once again, you have your pan and tilt here. So we can pan it like that and then tilt it up. Okay, so we have something like that. Perfect. So now if this window is bothering you, once again, you can come here and then click on off. And now you can see the effect of our red, green, and blue. So now looking at the image, you can see now what the layer mixer node is doing here. Okay. So now once again, this is our upmost node. This is our second node, the green, and then the third node is the blue. Now what is happening here? Once again, we have our red being our main layer, okay, over here, and it's being overlapped by our green, which is the node that then comes right after it, okay, so it's on top of it, and then vice versa, that is also overlapped by the blue that is on top of it. So as you can see, the upmost node is our main layer that then is being overlapped by whatever we're adding after it in our layer mixer stack, okay, as you can see over here. Now this is it gets very interesting when you then click here, okay, on our layer mixer, you right click and then you have composite modes, okay, so you can go through different composite modes to create different colors, different hues, different effects, and this can be very, very good if you're trying to achieve a specific look, okay. So now in this case, we are going to change it to lighten, and now you can see how this is affecting here our composite, and then you can play with those, right? So go back here and really add a few sort of different looks to your image, okay, depending on what exactly you are looking for. So now we're going to keep it back to normal, and once again, now you can see how the layer mixer is working compared to our parallel mixer, okay. So now something else to talk about, which is the order here. You would think that the order of the nodes here matters, but is that really true? So let's see if that's true or not. So now, once again, the red here being our upmost node, remember, is our main layer, okay, that is being overlapped by the two following colors, which are green and blue. Now, let's take that connection line, our red, which is connected to the top over here. So in case you can see it, I'm going to zoom in. Okay, so once again, you can see the red is connected to the top over here, but let's take that connection line here and attach it now to the bottom one, okay, just like that, and then take the blue now, which has been disconnected because we just attached the red, okay, and we are going to connect that to the top over here. Now, what you can see, it's something very, very different, as you can notice in the image here. What is happening now instead, since we swapped our red and blue, okay, the red now it's connected to the bottom and the blue is connected to the top. Now the blue being on the top, this is now has become our main layer that is being overlapped now by the green on top of it and the red on top of all of them, because the red now it's being connected to the third point here, you can see. And now this shows you that the actual order here of these nodes doesn't matter as long as you understand how the connections work. You can create all the different effects and understand how you can composite and play with your layer mixer node. Okay, so that is something very important. Now, what is the difference once again between this and the parallel node? Once again, this, okay, works very different, has a different mode of operation, operates differently. Okay, once again, we have a main layer that then is being stacked on top by, in this case, being a green and a red. Remember, we changed the red with the blue here. So the blue is underneath over here because this is connected to the top. Okay, and then we added our green that overlaps on top, and then the red overlaps on top of that as well. Okay, perfect. So now let's see once again how the parallel mixer would differ from this. So we can click here on the layer mixer, and on the option here, morph into parallel node, what's going to happen once I click, you can see that the parallel mixer node operates differently, because once again, this doesn't operate with a main layer and then stack things on top of each other. Rather, it blends all of the colors, in this case, once again, being red, green, and blue, it blends all of them together, okay? And it creates a very different effect. That is because the parallel mixer node operates differently, operates in a way where you're blending in all the different nodes that you're adding to your node stack. Okay, that is how that works. So I hope this demonstration helps you understand the difference between the parallel and the layer mixer node. On the surface, they look identical, but it's the mode of operation, the way they operate, that really changes. Okay, so now let's move into our next exercise. So what I'm going to do next is open up the timeline over here once again, and we are going to move up with your arrows, move up and down to this clip. Okay, this clip of the plane over here. I can now close the timeline so we can have a little more space and go back to my color wheels. Okay, your standard and your curves. Okay, so this is also the default, the standard look when you first enter the color page. And now what we're going to do, I am going also to adjust here the clip. Okay, so we're starting fresh with a new clip of this plane over here. So I am going also to mute that because it's loud, and we can see that now we have this plane, right, flying over this green water over here. So perfect. So now first thing that you're going to see here is that there's obviously an effect going on where you have a dissolve from the previous clip to the next of this airplane here in the airport. So in order to work around that and to deactivate that as you're color grading, there's this handy feature here, which is the unmix. So by clicking that, now you are basically bypassing the effect, or dissolve in this case. Perfect. So now what we're going to do next is to work on our water here and turn it blue, because if you do remember, if we go back to our reference, we had a blue water. Okay, so we want to recreate that look. Okay, so now back in our color page here, we are going to park it here. We're going to see our plane, okay, and the water over here. And the first thing we're going to do now that we've done that is to add a node. Okay, so first off, actually we're going to balance, right? So we are going to go in our gallery here, and on the base grades we have this balance over here, and we can drop that, or you can right click and say apply grade. Okay, now I can close the gallery, and now if I press Command D, this is before and this is the after. Okay, perfect. So now that we've done that, the next step is to create a new serial node. So Option S, okay, we add a serial node, and we are going to call this now the blue water. Okay, so just going to be our blue water. So let me zoom in a bit here so you can see better. And we should have something like that. Okay, so now we are going to turn our water blue. So the first step here that we're going to take immediately, it's going to be to change the hue over here. So we're going to rotate the hue to about 20. And you can see that now we have actually effectively turned our water blue. Okay, so now let's add a little bit of a few other things to this clip. So the next thing I'm going to do here on the curves, we are going to create sort of an S curve. Okay, so with the Y here selected. Okay, so your luminance, otherwise you will see it like this, and which is ganged, so you want to ungang it and have your Y for luminance and create a slight S curve, okay, to add a little bit of contrast to the image. To something like that should work. Perfect, something like that, it's good. And then what we're going to do, okay, now remember we have rotated our hue. So now if you want to change the gain in this case and you want to make it more blue, you have to go the opposite way, okay, because once again we have rotated the hue. So we are going to take it down to something like, not too much, this is very blue, so right, you want to be very subtle with that, so as you can see, to make it look a bit more natural. Something like that works. Okay, so now you can see the before and after here, what has happened. Okay, and then in case you want to add a little bit more contrast, you can always, right, make it a little bit darker here, if anything, and then increase, okay, your highlights. Okay, so now I don't want to go too far with it. So that should work. You can actually take it over here, right over here. Should work for us. Perfect. And now that we've done that, we can go on and add the next node. Now we are going to add a layer mixer node. Okay, the shortcut for that is going to be Option L on a Mac. Okay, and now I am going to also zoom in a bit, and we are going to rename this now to a yellow plane, because we're going to work on our plane now. Okay, so that is our next step here. Perfect. So now with the yellow plane selected here, we are going now to use a qualifier. Okay, so we're going to go here on our qualifiers, okay, and now we have your standard HSL, but instead we are going to use a 3D qualifier. The reason for that is because this is ideal when you're working with chroma keys, okay, because it's able to select and sort of identify colors better. So we're going to use that in this case, and what we're going to do now is to draw a selection around our water, our green water here. So just a large stroke like that, as you can see. Now here we can activate, okay, our highlight. And here I have it on black and white. If for you, it probably would look like, at first it would look like this. Okay, then you can remember you can switch all the different options. So have it here on black and white so you can see your selection, okay, your matte. And now we can go through our clips and add further strokes to even have a more refined selection here. So to do that then, okay, so I'm going to stop right over here and we are going to go here where it says picker add, okay, and we're going to make another selection. Now, as you can see, every time we make a selection, we have a more refined, okay, selection, but also we have added more strokes here, okay, under our qualifier 3D tab, as you can see. Okay, so now we can go back and hopefully add another one here. So we have a better selection. You can see they keeps adding here, okay, all the strokes. You can alternatively delete them here, okay, and you can see, but you also have all the values here. Okay, your RGB colors as well. So now we can see that we have a much cleaner selection, as you can see. I'm going to make another one just in case, just like that. Now we have 4 different selections. Okay, perfect. And now that we've done that, okay, I can now deactivate that. And what we're going to do, we are going to click this one where it says invert. Now we have actively now inverted to select our plane, as you can see over here. Now, you also have these strokes here that maybe you might not want to see them. So here, close to that, you can see the show paths. You can check that, and now we have our paths off of our screen. If you want to bring them back, just click that again, as you can see. So now, perfect. We have now legitimately just isolated our yellow plane, and which is exactly what we wanted to do. So now what we can do is adjust that even a little further. So first thing I would do here is to definitely go back to our curves, and with the Y, which is the luminance, we are going to once again add another S curve, okay, to add a little bit of contrast to that. Something like that should work, okay, something like that. Perfect. And then if you don't like it that is so yellow, then with the gain, okay, we can sort of tilt it towards an orange tone, okay, or something like that. Works. Perfect. I'll show you. This is the before, okay. So definitely this is a little bit better. And to make it look a bit more natural, we can also lower the saturation here by a bit. So I would say something like 40, okay. You can see now it looks more natural. You can even take it down further to something like 35. Okay, to make it look much more natural. I'm going to press Z now to take it back to full screen, and you can see that now we have actively now just targeted our plane over here. So all the changes now we're making are just to the plane, okay, to the yellow plane that we have selected here. So now what is the advantage of working this way compared to the parallel node in the previous exercises? Well, in the previous exercises, we're blending, okay, things together. If you remember the blue look with our skin tones, okay, so we were blending things together. Here instead, we are targeting specific portions of our image or clip, okay, and we're being very, very specific with what we want to select and what changes do we want to make. So this is one of the main advantages here of the layer mixer, okay, that you are able to pinpoint and select specific hues. So in this case, because we're using the qualifier, okay, but we're working in a different mode, okay. That is the key concept here to understand. With that taken care of now, the next thing we're going to do now is take care of our flamingos in here. Okay, so that is going to be our next operation. So the next thing I'm going to do here, now we have our blue water and yellow plane, is to press again Option L if you're on a Mac, okay? And now we're going to add a new node, and we are going to rename this node now to flamingos, okay? Flamingos, just like that, okay? So this is our flamingos, and we can zoom in here so you can see a little bit better, okay? And now what we're going to do next is to take the yellow plane, okay, the key output of our yellow plane, and connect it to the key input of our flamingos node that we just created. We're doing that because we want to carry over that keyed data, okay, that we have in this node, carry it over to the brand new node that we just created. Okay, so I'm going to take that and now connect it here. And once you do that, you can see that now we have all the information from the previous node to our newest node. Perfect. So now the next thing we're going to do now is obviously work on the flamingos. So we are going to scroll here to the timeline, and I am going to start over here. Okay, and we are going to now go on to our curves, and we are going to use this one over here, the curves, and I am going to first rename this to flamingos matte. Okay, just like that. And now we can start to draw around our flamingos over here, just like that. Okay, that should do it. Perfect. I can zoom out a little bit, create a few more points, and we should have something like that. Okay, so now that is very good. Now the next thing I'm going to do now is we need to keyframe this, okay, because the flamingos move, okay, throughout our clip. So we are going to go back on our tracker over here, and we're going to switch this from clip to frame. Now once we switch it to frame, now we can obviously click on this diamond here, and now that assigns a keyframe, as you can see over here. Now we can we can scrub through our timeline, and you can see that flamingos now towards the end are down here as well. So now we are going to extend our mask here, okay, our selection, and to something like that actually, and even here something like that should do it. Perfect. All right, and now this, because we are on frame, automatically assigned a keyframe here, and then we are going to scroll once again up to the point where the flamingos are not on frame anymore, and bring this up here as well. And then we're going to go at the beginning of our timeline over here and move this up as well. So now what you can see is that we are actively now masking our flamingos. As I'm playing the clip, you can see that that is happening right there. Okay, so that is what we just did. Now, in case you're going back to this other clip, right, the clip following, you can just scroll and go back to your previous clip over here. Perfect. So now I'm going to hide the timeline once again here and bring this back. And now that we've actively now added a mask around our flamingos, we can now make all the changes necessary, all the changes that we need. Perfect. So the first thing we're going to do here, we can see that we are definitely going to darken them a little bit. So I am going to go here on my gain and definitely darken it a bit, just like that. And the next thing we're going to do is to add that pink hue to our flamingos. So here on our gain, we are going to go towards the magenta, to something like that. Okay, so that's a little too much, maybe something like that. And now you can see the before and after. Okay, so we've now successfully, okay, added the desired hue to our flamingos. Okay, perfect. So now with that done, and with that successfully now executed, we can now click and select all of our layer nodes over here, our blue water, yellow plane, and flamingos. And now we can right click and create a compound node. Okay, so now everything is in this compound node, and this is very good to stay organized and have a very good organizational sort of like setup. Okay, it's very good to work like that. And then you can also rename this clip in case you want it. So you could say, you know, you can name it blue water or whatever you want. So in this case, I'm going to keep it to compound node. Now, how do I look at what's inside of it? You can double click. Well, technically you can right click over here, and you can see you have this show compound node. Okay, so once you click that, now you can see that we can go back inside to our compound node. Now, in case you want to go back, now you can come down here and to our compound node, and you can double click that, and that takes you back to your original node structure here with our balance still being there. Perfect. Now, another thing that you might be wondering is if I go back here to our compound node, okay, so I'm going to go back to show compound node. How do I sort of bring it back to the way it was before? Now that we've done a compound node, say I want to bring it back to the main menu. Okay, so how can I do that? Well, we can do that by right-clicking here, and instead of show compound node, we're going to click on decompose compound node. And once I do that, you can see that we're able to decompose it and bring it back to the way it was initially. Okay, and all you have to do, say in case you decide again to take it back to a compound node, make it a compound node, you can just once again select all the nodes that you need and then right-click and then create compound node over here. Okay, perfect. Another quick tip over here, if it's too cluttery for you, especially when we are in this mode over here and it's too cluttered and later on you have a lot of nodes and really it is a lot going on, there's a quick feature here. You can come here on your options and here you can uncheck this show thumbnails. So now you only have your labeled nodes but without thumbnails, which can make it easier if it gets too complicated or that's a lot. Okay, so once again you can just double click here and then you can choose to show thumbnails. Okay, so now I'm going to check it because I prefer it like this, but that is something that you can also do. Okay, perfect. So that is the end for this tutorial. So this is very, very important. I highly suggest you to learn how nodes work because it's going to be essential. It's going to be really the basis of what you work off of. And really, we went through a lot of things in this lesson, but these are all very, very useful things and the basis of color grading as well. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, remember that all the material, all the source files, and everything I've discussed in this lesson is available on the DaVinci Resolve website or the Blackmagic website. You can download everything through the website or just follow this link inside of this video, and you can find all the different material. Okay, as you follow the link and then it takes you to the website, you can download everything and follow along. Okay, I highly suggest you to also get the book. Okay, the ebook is free, or you can buy a book and follow along with the videos that we're discussing here, all the stuff that you've been seeing so far. Perfect. Thank you again for watching. Please make sure to give it a like and subscribe, and let me know if you have any questions below. I'll see you on the next lesson, lesson number 6. See you then. Bye.